Hey guys, and welcome back. We love that we're starting with some deep dives in the queue. Team players, it was a crazy weekend, wasn't it? Guys giving us zeros, guys giving us Bateman level 20s and 30s. Man, it was something. Two lineups moving on. And Bob, I'm looking at this and saying we got a lot of good stuff going on here, a lot of good potential entering the semis. I'm super excited already.
What I love, Joe, is
I'm ready.
almost every single year there is one, two, maybe three players that take a person to the promised land that, for whatever reason, never showed up any other time during the season other than week 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Always happens.
And every single year, it always happens. A couple years back, Jerick McKinnon. A couple years, last year, Juwan Johnson. It always happens that somebody comes out of the woodwork. Will it be Tim Boyle? Probably not. Will it be a wide receiver, running back in the vein of Jalen McMillan, Patrick Taylor? Maybe.
Dude, I got a dark horse on this. It might be more of a want than a logic, but Mostert, man. Mostert's going to finally reappear.
Raheem Mostert? Maybe. Sure. Possibly.
I mean, there's no reason to believe that. It's mostly a want. Mostly a want.
I mean, I don't necessarily have a negative take on Raheem Mostert, but
Miami does.
Let's get into the questions. Let's start off with Jesse's deep dive. Jesse, we always appreciate we always appreciate your presence in the chat. So I'd like to kick it off with Michael Penix because out of the quarterback selections this week, I think that outside of the ones that we know that are going to be successful, Michael Penix provides us with an interesting opportunity for possible success. And I'd like to just kind of talk with you, Joe, and talk with Jesse, and talk with the audience as questions come in, and just kind of break down what we see as a potential floor ceiling, and why we see that. Okay. I think that that's a really good place to start here with this question. So let's just start with Penix himself. Joe and I, watching the Huskies when we're watching, the bowl games last year and the season last year, there was no reason to not be impressed.
No, there's not.
Michael Penix. Actually, it's one of Joe's favorite quarterbacks coming out this year.
Mm-hmm.
And
too.
There's a lot of things to be excited about with Penix. With any young quarterback, there's also things to be not excited about. Mm-hmm. Going in, looking at, PFF Pro, a bunch of other websites, I believe the 33rd also put out a draft scouting profile. And going in there and reading those scouting profiles, there's a couple of things that make me really curious when we measure them against the stats that we have present already and what we see as some weaknesses. So I'd like to start off with the strength, right? The strength is this guy can throw. All right.
I am too, Austin. He's cutting the corner on me.
This guy can throw. He has a good deep ball. There's no doubt about it. He has a good enough pocket presence. Mm-hmm. He, will stand and deliver, although it does look weird.
It looks weird because he looks like Rivers. And Rivers always looks weird.
And what we want also out of a starting quarterback right now is a quarterback that's paired up with quality players, has a quality running back, and is going to have opportunities to be successful. All of those things apply to Michael Penix.
Sure do.
There's an issue, though.
Oh, give it to me.
The issue is that he is one of the highest graded passers coming out this year. That was also one of the most inaccurate passers this past year. Just going off of PFF scouting profile here, they dropped an interesting percentage. The percentages they dropped was 22%. And that was...
Is that uncatchable balls?
That 22%, almost 23% is uncatchable, inaccurate passes. And that is something that is concerning. While it's a perfect spot, mind you, because the Giants are not super formidable as a defense. They're not really, it's not really turning the tables at all. But I do feel that when you are a young quarterback coming into your first NFL game at this point in the season with the weapons that Atlanta does have, that it potentially it might not be the best opening salvo for Michael Penix, because inaccuracy, granted, he's practiced all season. He's seen his NFL teammates. He's practiced against NFL teammates. And the Giants are kind of a nice way to kind of introduce yourself into the NFL.
They are.
But I worry about that. And, one of the things that I also worry about is when we look at average depth of target, okay? And we look at the average depth of target for everybody playing the Giants this year. The Giants have been getting eaten up when it comes to passes below 10 yards. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Most of the attempts here by most quarterbacks that have faced the Giants have been under 10 yards. When we look at over 20 yards, and this is the point where I think that 15 to 20 yards or above is where Michael Penix is probably going to win you a potential match. We have guys like Carr and Lamar. And
Carr's not playing.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I'm going back and looking at when they played the Giants.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay? When they played the Giants, we have had some successful passing situations. So Derek Carr had 6 attempts, Lamar 5, Deshaun 4, Big Russ 4. Those are attempts over 20 yards. Jane Daniels also 4. Jane Daniels went 4 for 4 for 112 yards and a touchdown. Lamar went 4 for 5, 3 touchdowns, 116 yards. And even Deshaun Watson went 2 for 47 with a touchdown. So, baking in those numbers, while most of these yards that Michael Penix is probably going to come by are going to connect in that 10 to 0 to 10 range in there, because he is a young guy. I also want to bring up the fact that when we look at plays in that 10 to 15 yard or 10 to 20 yard range, Jaden Daniels and Bryce Young both had 10 attempts and completed around half of those attempts. The most yardage in that range was Jaden Daniels, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield. And none of them threw a touchdown in that range, but still, there is a potentiality here of a successful situation. So then you look at it, does this match up with any of the pass catchers for Atlanta? Because in order to take advantage of that situation, in order to take advantage of Penix's good arm, we have to have pass catchers that are going to be able to get downfield. Does this profile well for London? Well, pulling up right now, it's taking me a little bit here because guys, I've told you time and time again, I've got to get a new computer here. What we're looking at with London is an ADOT of 10.7 to be exact. So on average, we're looking at an average depth of target of 10. That's purely in that range where Michael Penix is probably going to take advantage of that. Coupling with that, we go down to a guy like Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney could see significant upgradage. His ADOT is around 12.7. Then coming down and seeing if McLeod fits that profile at all. McLeod, 6.4. So if Penix is reined in a little bit more and is not taking those opportunities to get the ball deeper to Mooney or getting the ball deeper to London, it very well could profile that Ray-Ray McLeod fits better into the defensive, what New York Giants show more defensively. But that doesn't mean that Michael Penix isn't going to be able to take the top off. Will it benefit London more than Mooney? We'll see, because London is a great pass catcher.
Mm-hmm.
Mooney is as well. But when it comes to uncatchable balls, you know, they were getting a lot from Cousins already.
Yeah, and so I
will
think
that change much? I'm not sure. But I do know that London isn't a bad start. All of this to say, London profiles to be successful versus the Giants.
Oh yeah, that part's
you always have to be concerned about Bijan as well. But London profiles really well, and so does Darnell Mooney, with a little bit of an uptick for Mooney. We'll see what happens, but it's not a bad play this week by any stretch of the imagination.
So, Jesse, my answer for you on this, specifically about Penix, is that he's unorthodox in the same way Rivers was. In fact, if you look at him, he profiles almost exactly like the lefty version of Rivers. And that, to me, is the only real concern when we talk about London, because the timing of bringing him in as starter is, to me, alleviates the fear Bob brought on the table of the accuracy woes that he had at college, because you're not going to bench your starter in a playoff hunt if you think you're going to get a downgrade. Yes, Cousins was inaccurate, but there also is a situation where we don't get to see him at practice. He's certainly able to progress now that he has NFL footwork around him. And the other part of why his balls were inaccurate, he wasn't exactly a high target guy, but he was a big don't hit me guy. So he threw a lot of balls out of bounds, which dramatically increases the amount of uncatchable balls, because he was trying to make them uncatchable. So, you don't get the interception on the field as you throw the ball away. So I factor all that in. And at the end of the day, I trust the Atlanta staff that they're able to see what he is and able to improve his footwork. I love his arm. If his accuracy gets there, Rivers is the appropriate comp. But the only real fear I have for London is, does the lefty quarterback mess with you? Because it has happened to receivers in the past. Flat out, some of them are better at doing their out route to the left than they are to the right. It's just human nature. Some people are better at left guards than right guards. It's just the side of the field does matter. And if London gets caught up in it, it could be an issue. That being said, it's less of an issue in this situation because Penix is a statue and not a runner. So all in, I still personally never have liked London game. And if you have a better fit than London, I'm 9 times out of 10 going to go that way. But London is certainly not on my don't touch list just because Penix is there. Penix will improve London's game more so than not. So, all right, guys, start off with a deep dive here. We're going to do our quick hits now as you guys will rattle them out at us as we're answering Jet's deep dive
next. So wait, but to your point, Joe, as we move on here, left-handed quarterbacks tend to throw to the left side, yes?
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're Tua, you only throw to the left.
Going to NFL depth charts, Darnell Mooney's on the left.
Yeah, I know. That's my fear with London.
Again, this could definitely benefit Mooney. His profiles well to what we're going to probably see out of Penix, at least in this first game. But London is also a guy that I could see as being very successful against this defense.
So, Jesse, start Jonnu, Kincaid, or Strange. The way you wrote it is probably the way I would rank them. Jonnu Smith is certainly my number one. I like Kincaid's upside. I like Buffalo more than Bob does. But Strange has a strange amount of volume down in Jacksonville. Bob, I'm doing a Strange punt every single time he.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, Jesse.
I'm just declaring that now.
As a quick hit here, we can talk about the value of these three players in a lot of depth, but we won't right now. But if you want to come back to it, we can. But if Waddle can't go, there's a very realistic chance that they might use Malik Washington or whatever to get another wide receiver on the field. But Jonnu Smith is one of the best targets in the NFL right now, who is making plays. Kincaid also has a target, but isn't making the plays that matter. So where I fall on this is I think Jonnu Smith's volume is very comfortable for me in a situation where he is getting valuable touches. He's being relied upon to catch touchdowns whereas Strange has not yet had that opportunity to get onto that level. For me, it's Jonnu, Strange, and Kincaid. I just can't get over the fact of Kincaid's volume where he's sitting at, but it's not being turned into anything.
That's true.
Brunson, to this question here, if you go back into yesterday's episode, we could talk about this in depth if you want to a little bit later, but going back into yesterday's episode, I don't want to overtalk McMillan like I did yesterday, but I'm firmly on Jalen McMillan. As I say this, they're probably making the plan right now down in Tampa to not throw the ball to McMillan at all because I'm saying this. But
you got to stop seeing so negative, Bob. He's a good pick. The optics are right.
The volume, the opportunities, the amount of pass attempts that Tampa is throwing all line up that McMillan has situated himself, maybe not in that same volume as Godwin, but he's definitely taken a huge chunk of the target share, and Baker trusts him. Right now, Pacheco's a hard trust with a very, very low floor, and Reed is also a hard trust because his situation isn't as definable as Jalen McMillan's situation. Although I think Reed has a huge upwards potential, but his situation is hard to define. Alejandro.
Welcome back, by the way, Alejandro.
With the Broncos, Colts, Falcons on the wire. Also, if I drop the Colts, they have the Giants championship week. Alejandro, you can also go back yesterday. We'll briefly talk about this today. And if you want a little bit more in depth, you can go back yesterday, or we could talk a little bit more later. Joe set up a really good argument as to why the Broncos are not a good defense this week. One of the primary things, although they've been getting the turnovers, they've got them a lot against Winston. But where it matters for Joe at here is that the Chargers aren't turning the ball over. So if you're not turning the ball over, and this just comes down to where's those opportunities, you're probably not going to see as many as you have in the last couple games. I still think they're a solid team. Colts defense, strong play this week, very strong play this week, but you just saw them give up a lead after having 3 interceptions against a quarterback that was really struggling. Will they learn from that? I don't know, because Anthony Richardson's not sustaining drives. And with a team that's not sustaining drives, if you're not sustaining drives late in the game, your defense is going to continue to be on the field, and they're not that great of they're not bad, but they're not that great of a defense to continue to put
they're not good
over and over and over again. For me, it's the Falcons. The primary reason I'm on the Falcons isn't because they're a phenomenal defense. And the same thing I said about Anthony Richardson could apply to Michael Penix. But they have a strong running game in the same vein as Jonathan Taylor. But they also, in the last couple of weeks, they set themselves up really successfully. And you can see where their DFS points are at here. I'm not saying anything ill will about the Colts. But the Falcons matchup, if they're facing Tim Boyle, there's a realistic chance that, there's going to be a lot of unsustained drives on the Giants side. A lot of opportunities that this defense will be healthy late into the game. They won't be tired. I don't know where that turnover will be at, but Tim Boyle is probably due for at least 2. And regardless if it's Tommy DeVito, he's due for 2 as well. I mean, I just think it sets us up for a lot of success with Atlanta this week. I like all 3 in different ways, but Atlanta is a strong play with a more turnover-prone quarterback, more turnover-prone team. And Austin, to this point here, I just want to touch on it. I'm not going too crazy this week with Michael Penix. But if my team is in a consolation game or anything like that, there's no skin off my back in starting Michael Penix. And here's the thing too, guys. I'm not starting him in any leagues, but yeah, I'll take a chance on him in DFS, Joe.
Absolutely
do that because I can pair him up, get a couple of the Atlanta pass catchers, get Atlanta's defense, and if it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, it's really no skin in the game. But if I'm in a major championship game, I really want to look at these situations.
You're going with your studs.
If I don't have a stud, maybe I throw Mac Jones out there, Michael Penix, take a chance because the situations are good enough, guys. They're good enough. The stats back it up that they're good enough. But, it's something to be cautious of. Steve, Josh Allen, Achane, Chase Brown, St. Brown, DJ Moore, Jonnu, Pacheco in the flex, Atlanta defense versus Lamar, Cook, Reynolds, Hill, Devontae Adams, Andrews, Jennings, Houston D. That's what I'm facing. I like your team much better, man.
Yeah.
Tit for tat.
Jonnu carries a lot of weight.
Tit for tat, the quarterbacks are probably an even split.
Yeah.
You go back in there then. Achane and Cook. Achane gets production in the passing game. Cook needs that touchdown or two to kind of be relevant.
He wins the running back room, no doubt.
Chase Brown versus Reynolds. Chase Brown by far and away. St. Brown versus Hill. That's a little bit closer than a lot of people might suggest.
No, it's not with Monty out. St. Brown's going to benefit a lot from that.
But I do think that Amon-Ra has a better game than Hill this week. You go into your other wide receivers. Devontae Adams is probably going to outscore DJ Moore, but it's probably going to be close. Jonnu, I think, outweighs Andrews, but Andrews does get a decent amount of volume, does get end zone looks.
Andrews never scored a touch. His entire career, he's never scored a touchdown against the Steelers.
I think Jennings is the better flex play, in my opinion. Joe likes Pacheco.
That's close, though. That's not a blowout. That's a toss-up.
And I think from what I just said about the Falcons, although I do love Houston's, tenacity and defense in general, I think that Atlanta does get you that because they're facing a worse player.
I'm starting to think Houston might win that game, even if Mahomes comes in and plays it. Mahomes can get brutally hit, and Houston gets at people.
Oh, they do. They absolutely do. Maybe you see a fumble or something in that game. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look more into
Austin. He's a statue, dude. He has as much running upside as like Rodgers. So not Rodgers prime, like Rodgers now. I'm not going on Penix's upside running. That's not a sellable point of any logistics.
Let's just look this up real quick because I do want to verify that. Back in 2023 on the Washington Huskies, his rushing stats were games played 15, rush attempts 35, total rush yards. I mean, total rush yards because they do take into account sacks in this, 8. So,
that means most of that. That also means most of that's quarterback sneaks though, or kneels. Because Neal's counting rushing plays too.
Yeah. Tyler, grab Ford and Christian Watson for what to Otten, Will Lutz, Broncos defense. I'm grabbing Ford for sure, and I'm giving up Otten. I think we can. I think we can safely, because we've seen other options arise. I'm not going to say super safe, but I think we can safely assume that Otten is not the play that we're going to be going with right now.
Millinate into it.
And I like Will Lutz as a kicker this week. In a good situation, but I also can see maybe being a little bit less successful. I'm okay dropping Lutz or the Broncos defense if I'm not playing one of the two.
Yeah, you don't need two kickers.
But I think Ford's a must grab, and maybe even as I've been looking at information, I think he's a reasonable, if not a very honorable.
He got like every carry after Chubb went out.
Yeah, and the thing that I read, I was reading and looking at the stats that were coming up from the last parts of the season. He is, even if they elevate Donta Foreman from the practice squad, Ford is still the guy that they are valuing when they're behind. So he gets looks when they're ahead, and he gets looks when they're behind. And I don't see a situation where they're ahead against the Bengals, to be honest with you, unless the Bengals just give up, which they might.
Devontae Foreman goes crazy.
I don't see that.
So, Austin, I appreciate you asking this again. My answer is going to be the same as yesterday. Out of this grouping, I want BTJ and Jennings.
Yeah, and Austin, definite rain. Definite rain. It's hard to see a good clip where, JSN is performing well in rain. I mean, again, JSN is a volume play, a super high volume play. So if you feel that JSN could accumulate 10 targets, because he's also an efficient volume play. He catches almost everything that comes his way. So if you think he's getting 10 targets and can get to that precipice of 60 yards, maybe you see 6 catches, 60 yards for 12 points. BTJ has a smash play again, and Jennings is one of those scenarios where it definitely kind of piques my interest a lot. Right now, I'm on BTJ and JSN, but Jennings is my easy kind of flex into because I am concerned about the weather. I am concerned if Geno Smith is going to be fully healthy. I'm just concerned in general that game could just be ugly and gross, and we're just generally disappointed. That's my Wednesday feel about that. JSN for the volume, BTJ for the high upside and volume, Jennings for the high volume and a little bit more upside than Jameson and a little bit more upside than Tyreek. But you got to just say, I mean, like, it is Tyreek Hill, but like we've said that about other wide receivers, and they've just
yes, we have.
Do I start JSN or BTJ half PPR? Also, Brees or K9? I'm on. So Diego, you just heard what I said about those wide receivers. I'm on BTJ out of the 2.5 PPR because what I'm looking at here is value in terms of the touchdown markets for Jacksonville in general. So when you look at Jacksonville as a totality, which players are they going to go to score? And essentially, that's maybe Bigsby and definitely BTJ. So he's accumulated all of that touchdown upside that's basically left the team when Gabe Davis and everybody else got hurt and whatnot. When it comes to JSN, he has a good amount of touchdown upside. But I want to just pump the brakes on it because that touchdown upside really very much depends on Geno, right? So there's around 35% of the team's touchdowns are going to JSN, and for BTJ, what are we looking at here for BTJ? For BTJ, it's about 53% of the team's touchdowns.
It's all of it. All the offense to BTJ. It's so stacked.
So I think you have to lean on that in half PPR. And I think it's reasonable to lean on that against a Vegas defense. Also, Brees or K9, assuming both play. I don't really like either of them. You could write a game script and Tyler went with talking about Charbonnet. You could write a game script where they give the running backs the ball a decent amount if it's definitive rain, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be good footing. That doesn't mean that it's going to be good yardage. Looking at the totality of that game, we're probably not going to be really happy with the outcome of the fantasy players in that game in general. In best balls, yeah, I'll take a chance on JSN. Yeah, I might take a chance on Ken Walker, but if I'm in my championship game or my semifinals, I just don't think I can. Depending on a lot of things. So my lean is into Brees Hall, Diego, but I also think that Brees Hall and Jerome Ford have the same amount of upside this week. And I don't like to say that. That's really gross for me to say that.
It was. It was gross for me to hear it.
But it's true.
I don't think it is.
Think about it, Joe. Where are the touchdowns going?
In Cleveland?
No. Where are the touchdowns going on the Jets? Devontae Adams. Brees Hall gets one. I mean, you saw the usage last week coming back from the injury. Maybe that's a little bit better this week. You can trust Brees a little bit more than K9, I think.
I think so too, but I'm not in love with either one, quite frankly.
Mark, Hunter Henry, Dalton Kincaid, or Brenton Strange at tight end, half PPR. Here's the honest truth about all three of these guys.
Touchdown dependent.
Limited to 0 touchdown potential.
And the half PPR really hurts it because you can make an argument. See, I like Kincaid because of it's a much higher scoring offense. It should put up more points. But Strange definitely has more volume going his way in terms of bringing the ball in. So half PPR hurts that for Strange. But all three of them are touchdown dependent, especially Henry. And I don't think you're getting it out of Henry.
Here's the thing. Okay.
No period,
looking at the whole of everything here. If you are looking for that, because like I said, in order for a tight end to be fantasy relevant in a given week, he needs at least 10 points to be at least close to the top 10 and worth starting. While Brenton Strange is the newcomer on the block, and you know me, I will always chase points where the points are available at. When you look at the total touchdown markets for these teams, it goes 7%, 10%, 13%. So the 13% is Brenton Strange.
Yeah, but it's such a smaller pie.
It is a smaller pie, and I like the condensed pie. When I'm looking at it against a shitty team, and I'm condensing the pie, this is the same argument.
No, I'm not talking about condensing the pie in terms of the percentages. I'm saying just there's not enough offense in Jacksonville to make it worth it.
I understand that, but to your same point about there's not enough offense coming into it, Mac Jones has been throwing the ball more over the last several weeks. Yeah. So it's more relevant that there is those opportunities. Josh Allen does the same thing, and with all of the pass catchers healthy, you know, Kincaid's still around 10% of the team's total touchdown market. So as I see it, in a potential blowout spot, do they have a reason to play Kincaid in any other capacity than they've already played him this year? And the answer is probably no. Hunter Henry, same thing in a blowout game. Austin Hooper is more likely to get a touchdown than Hunter Henry.
It is a blowout. The division games tend not to be blowouts.
I get it.
It's a general rule.
I get it. But the same, I mean, it's the same kind of principle here. You know, and even just looking at targets a game here, and you go to Henry, he's around 5'6". You go to Kincaid, he's around the same. And then you come to Strange, and again, he's elevated the other game, but 3 when you take across the whole part of the season.
Yeah, but you got to just look at him since he's been a starter.
I get it. I mean,
I would go Kincaid, Strange, Henry to answer your question, Mark.
Yeah, I don't really like any of them, definitely in a half PPR, but my lean would be Strange.
So, Tyler, I'm going to quickly hit this one for you because you're in this conundrum of you want to find a reason to justify to cut Charbonnet if Walker plays because you want to keep the Broncos defense because they're ranked number 1. And I got to tell you, you're never going to play the Broncos defense because you already had the Bills. Next week, the Bills are hosting the Jets at home. Denver is going to Cincinnati. You are not playing any defense, especially a certainless defense, against Chase Brown and Burrow. It's not happening. So therefore, knowing you're never going to use the Broncos defense, regardless of their rank, means they should be what's expended. If Walker plays or not plays, Charbonnet is a better value than the Broncos, period. So that's why you should be having no issue cutting the Broncos.
I disagree.
On what part?
Totally disagree with that. You know, I am wholeheartedly on the bus with your assumption that I don't want to trot the Broncos out against the Bengals if points against is my main statistic. I get it. I understand that wholeheartedly. But what I also understand is that Joe Burrow isn't immune to the interception.
That's true.
So where I'm looking at is that when I'm looking at this Broncos defense, the thing that makes the Broncos defense the highest scoring or one of the highest scoring defenses out there for fantasy is the fact that they are ball hawkers. They go out there, they're making plays, they're there. On the season, when you compare this week to last week, or this quarterback to the Bengals, when you look at Herbert, he's thrown 2 interceptions all year. When you look at Joe Burrow, it's
we had 2 interceptions last week
against the Titans team, who's not that great. The Cowboys also took advantage of that, and the Steelers also took advantage of that. The Broncos can't take advantage of that. I'm not a certainless, team. Yeah, that's definitely something to kind of keep your head on a swivel about, for sure. And he's gotten 4 of their interceptions this year. So, yes, I totally get that. But in the games against the Browns and the Raiders, where they're playing crappy quarterbacks, he didn't get an interception at all. That was all other people. So I could make an argument, Tyler, that I would rather keep the Broncos and cut Charbonnet if this situation presented itself, if Walker were to come back. Because if I'm arguing with my head about, am I going to start Charbonnet or not? But Joe's absolutely right. You most likely will start the Bills defense depending on how they perform this week. But I would rather keep the Broncos in case the Bills perform poorly this week for the third straight week in a row. Then I know I have my starting defense next week. That's where I stand on that, Tyler. Rumpel, we haven't forgotten about your deep dive. We will get to that. Lipsy, I'm still stuck on starting Purdy or Kyler. So many are saying start Kyler, then others say start Purdy. I don't know what to do. Help, please. So, Lipsy, I talked about this with myself last night as I was driving home, going to the Dollar Tree, getting candy for the kids at work. And there is a pathway where, like I said yesterday, I'm not sure where the passing touchdowns are going to come from Kyler. Then you hear this news about, he says, and it was posted today on Twitter or X, that he wants to get Trey McBride a touchdown this week. He wants to give it to him. He wants to give him 2. So, coach speak, players speak, take that for what it's worth. But when you look at the metrics, and I'm only looking at the metrics for this conversation, is that in order for Kyler to have a successful week above 15 points, you want 20. In order for that to happen, Kyler will have to throw for a touchdown, rush for a touchdown, and get 60-ish yards on the ground. Okay? Mm-hmm. That's possible because as we understand it, the Panthers, and everybody knows this, are the worst rush defense in the league. And when they face rushing quarterbacks, they're also really bad. Yeah. So if Kyler ends up running the ball, there is a framework where you could say to yourself, he can be successful. It depends on how much that he's going to run it, which he doesn't have to because James Conner is there. If Trey Benson is out, if Amari DiMercato is continuing to be out, and then Conner, I don't want to bougie anything, but if Conner were to get hurt, this game is now in the hands of Kyler Murray, and they would look like embarrassing fools to lose to the Panthers, okay? Mm-hmm. As it goes for Brock Purdy, in order for Brock Purdy to reach that same market, you're going to need at least, in my estimation here, at least 3 touchdowns. Okay? So in order to make this decision, what I would do, and this decision is going to be totally up to you at this point, but the stats will say, if you think Brock Purdy has a chance at getting 3 touchdowns plus 250 yards, Joe, can you look up this market on FanDuel? What's that market set at right now for Brock Purdy's yards? Just as an example so we can see it. We'll come back to this, Lipsy. We'll circle back to this because I don't want to treat this as a deep dive. I know I've been doing that recently over the past couple of weeks. But
you have been.
But that's where I'm at. If Brock Purdy's market is somewhere in that 3 touchdown range to 250, I say it's safe to trot out Brock. When I look at Kyler, what I'm looking at from Kyler is there a potential for him to be plus 50 yards rushing touchdown, 225 passing, and potentially a passing touchdown? Because that's what he's going to have to do to break that 20-point mark. Brock's going to have to do it through the air. And as I said the other day, they're not that much different in their rushing totals on the season. Garendo's banged up again with a hammy injury. So maybe that does play into your role where Brock Purdy's going to have to sling in. And like I said, 2 games out of the last 5 that weren't weather dependent, he's thrown for over 300 yards. So that's where I'm at on Brock. Everything matches up with Brock. But Joe's going to look that up, and we'll circle back to this. I'm going to add this to the deep dive queue because I do want to talk about that a little bit more. Austin, I know Penix has been a statue, but I think he has the athleticism to be able to give some rushing upside. It probably won't show up, but there's a chance. There's always a chance. There's always a chance that Kyler goes off and all that stuff. CC, we'll see you on the deep dive queue. Quincy, we'll see you on the deep dive queue. It's right. Not the the Tyreek Hill we wanted, but he hasn't been that bad besides last week. He hasn't. I mean, but the thing that we want from Tyreek is what we're not getting when they face the certain coverages that they've been facing. And no team has been stupid enough to drop them out of that coverage. Maybe without Waddle, maybe they play it differently. But Malik Washington could also do some damage if they were to bring up Malik Washington into a full-time role as they did when Waddle went down. I actually like him for DFS lineups this week. He's like 3,700 or something, super cheap in the Jalen McMillan category as last week. George, Brees or Tony Pollard, and then sit two between Garrett Wilson, Jacoby Myers, and Cooper Kupp. Well, here's where I feel about Cooper Kupp, guys. He's dead to me. He's dead to me. He knocked me out of the championship game in like 2 leagues with his 0. If I would have not played him, I'd have been fine. I would have started Mike Evans. I'd have been fine. But we can only start 2 wide receivers with 2 flexes, but I also got screwed by David Montgomery. And Juwan Jennings. So, you look at the totality of it. The framework is there for him to have a successful game. But I do think what the Jets suffer from the most is the deep ball. And if Stafford can take advantage of that with Nakua, you could easily see a low-ish ceiling game for Cooper Kupp, somewhere in the market of like 6 catches, 40 to 70 yards, somewhere in there, maybe a touchdown. So you can easily walk yourself.
I think it's a little hard on Kupp. I'm
saying, if Puka's the dog and they want to keep Rodgers off the field with Kyren, there's a narrative that you can write that won't be so successful. But alternately, at the same time, the Jacoby narrative for success is really hard to write if Desmond Ridder is the quarterback. Okay, so let's wait and see on what the quarterback situation is. Although Desmond Ridder did pepper him with targets in like the 4th quarter this past week, so he ended up with like 5 for 50 or 5 for 60 or something of that nature. I'd be sitting Jacoby, but I will ask you, George, out of these players yourself, which one would you be mad benching? Because I can easily walk myself into a conversation where I'm benching Jacoby and I'm benching Cooper Kupp and I'm trotting out Garrett Wilson against the Rams. But also I can see a situation where, they stopped giving the ball to Garrett Wilson last week and just peppered Devontae Adams. So there are pluses and minuses with all of those players. As it goes, my lean would be to start Garrett Wilson. Joe will probably want to start Cooper Kupp. As it goes for this question here as well, Joe's not starting any Jets, so by default, he's starting Pollard. Pollard, Spears worries you, but Spears is a complimentary back. Spears is a pass-catching back. That's where he's done most of his damage. Last week, he's not the primary running back on this team. Tony Pollard is still getting the primary share of running back duties. So if you think, and the other piece to this, George, if you think Pollard is going, if they're going to have the lead, Pollard is going to have a better game. If they're going to be behind against the Colts, Spears is going to have a better game. So watch that narrative. Where do you think the better game will be? And I believe with a Mason Rudolph team that Pollard will have a better game, because Mason Rudolph, while not great, is better than Will Levis. The optics back this up.
Yeah.
He is better than Will Levis. I forgot I have Jacoby. If AOC plays, would you replace him with Jennings? Would you replace him with Jennings or JSN? I don't know if I start Jacoby over Jennings or JSN. I would really, really continue to watch that weather in Seattle, because if not, JSN is a great play against Minnesota's zone defense. That's where I'm at. It's like such a great spot. It just sucks that the weather, we've been burned by weather in like 3 games that were very important this past like 4 weeks. And you can't write that off. Definitely, it says definite rain.
So, Bob, to answer your question before, neither one of the 2 sportsbook have the passing up for the Niners.
Okay. Quincy, as it goes here with these 3, again, watch the weather. I'd be on Hawk over Strange. If the weather is bad, I'd be on Strange.
Yep. Doctor Strange making it rain.
That's just where we're at on that. Coming in here, CC kicker question. Not kicker question yet. There was a kicker question in here.
No, it's deep dive's a kicker question because he's a lovely person.
All right. CC. In one league, we're maniacs and play week 18. Which of these guys are in danger of being rested week 18? Cup, Addison, Brees, Pacheco, McBride, Hurts.
See, I don't think Hurts is going to be in danger because they're going to be playing for the bye. They're half a game behind Detroit now, and it doesn't look like that. Well, Detroit has hard division games, so
honestly,
I think Hurts is going to have to play at least a half.
Pacheco probably.
I think Pacheco is your biggest risk. Of getting benched. The rest of them have all no reason to be benched. Unless the Rams, although I don't doubt they will be, are locked into their playoff position by winning the division. The only realistic one I see is Pacheco of that list, CC.
All right, Joe, hit that next question. I just want to take a look at a couple things first.
What's up, guys? Same question as last week. Start Ladd versus Denver, Addison versus Seattle, Andrews versus Pittsburgh, or Hunter Henry against Buffalo. So I'll start with the tight end part first here, Brad. Andrews has never scored a touchdown against Pittsburgh. Were you saying Hunter Henry's injured?
No, I'm saying that even though Mark Andrews has never scored a touchdown against Pittsburgh, he has a better chance than.
It still has to be him, but I'm trying to temper expectations.
But out of the two, he has the better chance.
He definitely has a higher ceiling. I just don't think it's likely to get there. So in terms of the other one, Ladd versus Denver, Addison versus Seattle, the rain might really make this Ladd dramatically. I think Ladd's getting you a touchdown no matter what. I mean, I just basically think that's where the Chargers offense is at. He's the one who gets some touchdowns. It's what's going to happen. So I would go with Ladd. Bob's really upset about the rain in Seattle. Like it's a new thing.
I am.
But I'm going with Ladd there.
Yeah, I mean, like that, it really, but the reason I'm so upset about it is that this game, we have seen so many successful slot players against Minnesota's defense, because they're just dropping in the zone and these players are taking advantage of it. I just am so disappointed in it because Addison has been so successful this season. The volume is insane, but the weather in some of these games has been absolutely shitty. Ladd's a good play. I mean, he is a really good play. When we look at Ladd specifically, there's nothing to not like about what Ladd's been doing over the past several weeks. And Herbert has been getting him the ball. He makes plays. He's doing really well. And you can even make an argument too when you go to like the touchdown numbers as well. 33% of the team's total touchdowns. 33% of the team's total touchdowns. But Addison, I mean, again, like I said about Addison out wide has been so successful this season. And it just sucks because this Seattle-Minnesota game has all the writings on the wall that this could have been a game where there could have been a boatload of points scored between these two offenses because of the wide receiver situation being so good for these teams. And the reclamation projects that are Geno Smith and Sam Darnold. I mean, the narrative kind of writes itself if you're looking at it from a narrative perspective. But both of these wide receivers are so good. Like I want to find a way to bench Addison over Ladd. It's just really tough for me because both always have a chance at a touchdown. I like Ladd this week, and the weather keeps me off Addison. That's
a long way of getting there for a quick hitter, but I like it. So my league dropped his players once he lost his playoffs. First off, your commissioner should undo this. You can't just cut your whole
in a
thing
heartbeat undo that.
What's that?
I pick up Puka though. I mean,
Puka's definitely the answer.
If I can only pick up one guy and I had to get to the waiver wire immediately, it's Puka.
It's Puka than Kyron, but your league commissioner can't be letting that happen.
Because
that's Bush League. That's Bush League to the max.
That's Bush League. That is Bush League. And that goes to another question that was up at the top. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I didn't. And, Josh mentioned here, thoughts on eliminated league mates picking up players. I think it's petty and super annoying, but there's nothing I can do about it. Yeah, there is nothing you can do about it. And I do think that, commissionerships do matter. And some people write it off if it's just kind of like, we're not doing this for any money, or, oh, we're doing this for money, but it's only like $5, whatever, $10 here or there. And people don't take it seriously. But I mean, like, stuff like this ruins the integrity of a league and makes people not want to come back.
That's right.
If you're out of it, you're out of it. Stop.
Yeah.
Like I get the competitive nature of it, but there's like a gentleman's agreement at that point in time that you can't do that. And to that same point, Lipsy, you have to go out there. If the player's available for you, you got to go out there and grab Puka. But at the same point in time, I just don't think. I think
you shouldn't be allowed to do it.
I think there should be a gentleman's agreement to say, we're not doing this, guys. Like, don't pick up this player. It's not fair. It ruins the integrity of the league. 305, right. Welcome.
So, Strader, here's where I'm at. I've said this a couple of different times, a couple of different ways. If Green Bay was not on Monday Night Football, I would be much more into them. But the fact that they are makes me thoroughly believe they're going to have a convincing lead at halftime, not 13.5 points, but a convincing lead at halftime, and then just play cover shells all the way until the game's over. They're just going to play soft and easy because they're going to just want to get out there and get ready for the next week. If it was Sunday, wouldn't have this concern. But because it's Monday night, that is my concern about the Packers. There'll be way too much prevent. Buffalo, on the other hand, they're going to bury the Patriots. I mean, that's just what they do. It's a division game, and division games tend to be tighter as it is, particularly lower scoring. So I think that the Buffalo game's an under, and that's why I want to go with that.
All right. Raider, we made a really good argument yesterday in the episode. If you want to go back, we talked a lot about defenses in yesterday's episode. So feel free to go back through and watch that. But there's a convincing argument we can make for Green Bay, and there's a really convincing argument that we can make for Buffalo. Drake May has thrown an interception in almost every single game this season. So whatever happens with that, we're not sure what's going to happen with that, but it's almost guaranteed he throws an interception. New Orleans is in a terrible passing situation as well, with Rattler or Hainer, whatever they decide to do here. But there is a narrative that you can write where Green Bay will just hold the ball as long as possible because Jordan Love is only attempting approximately like a 23 to 26 pass attempts a game on average. And so around 26 on average. But you look at it and you say, okay, there's a really good argument you can make where Josh Jacobs could just go. And because New Orleans rush defense is absolutely horrible as well. So there's an argument that you can make that Wilson or Brooks or Jacobs, that this team could have over 160 yards rushing on the ground, and they just pound it down their throat. And there's no opportunities for them to take advantage of shitty quarterback play because there's not enough sustaining drives.
That's life.
That's a discussion to make. I think both are really good plays. We gave it a lot of good reasons yesterday. I'm on Buffalo there. I'd be most mad benching Cup if he went off,
and that's fair. And you probably should
play him. Then you play him. If that's guys. Again, we're all in this to try to make a little bit of side, But again, it's supposed to be fun. We've worked at it all year. These are our teams. This is what we put together. If I bench somebody, but if they went off and the optics are saying that there's a very good chance, again, Cooper Kupp's optics last week were great. Then the monsoon, not so great outcome. That's
awesome.
Sucks. That's why I'm a little bit worried about JSN and Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, guys like that this week. But if I bench them, I'll be mad. There's an emotion tied to it. Sometimes you got to take the emotion out and just start the better player. But in this discussion, all three have similar issues. All three have the same kind of problems. So that's why I asked you. That's where I'm at. Drop Reichert or Lutz. So Tyler, with the rain, I'm not trotting out a kicker in that game. I love Reichert, you know that, but I can't trot out a kicker in that game. Lutz is a reasonable argument. this comes from Fantasy Pros, guys. Just breaking this down here. We're looking at field goal attempts since week 11. Boswell, Aubrey, Ryland, Carlson, Sanders, Elliott, and Joey Sly lead the league in field goal attempts. If you go into just total field goals made, that's Boswell, Sanders, Ryland, Aubrey, Dicker. Lutz is at 9 for 9 since week 11. So he's also paired up 16 extra points, which is around 4th in the league. So out of the two, I think you have to be on Lutz out of the two. Lipsy, would you guys even risk starting Sharp Walker since they go against the Vikings? My only other running backs are Rico and Tank. Unless I put Cook on running back, then start another flex. I think it's very reasonable, Lipsy, to go Cook and Rico over the combination of Sharp and Walker.
But that doesn't mean you don't put one in your flex eventually. But for your starting running back spot, that's how I would start the league entering the week.
With that game, I believe that game is at night, Joe. So it's really hard walking into that and being like, oh, I got really shitty weather. Again, the weather might not be shitty, but it does say definite rain. But that game is 4:00. So, you could pivot if you wanted to. You could pivot from all three of your running backs are in the late games. So you can make that pivot on Sunday if you wanted to. Rico, I think, is a great play.
No, because it's for a flex. You're going to need the other ones out. What I'm saying is, Bob, you're right. It should be Rico and Cook in the running back positions, and then work out your flex as you get closer with injury news.
Yeah, that's where I'd be at for sure.
Walker, what's up? Feel nervous about my wideouts this week. I need to go to the waiver wire. Your wideouts are Devontae Smith, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Reed, and Worthy. Now, dude, I think you're good. You only play 2, right? It's Devontae and Amon.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go the waiver wire. I'm not that nervous about Worthy, to be honest with you. I'm really not. If you wanted to start him, but the only problem is you can't. If you because that game is on Saturday, you got to make that decision early. And if you're only starting 2, I think Amon-Ra and Devonta Smith are reasonable plays. Again, you're probably nervous that Devonta Smith didn't do well last game, and you're right to be nervous. But this is the Slim Reaper's job. The Slim Reaper is gonna come back from the dead maybe in this game. Concerned with Pollard or Tracy, both questionable. That's 2 out of my 3 running backs. Fair, Nick. I mean, what I would do if I were you, I would go out there if I thought the narrative would point in the direction that the Titans would be not leading this game a significant amount. I'd go out there and see if I can go out and get Spears right now if he's still available. Ford is also out there too as a pivot if you needed a pivot. Guys, I'm not. Joe, tell me I'm crazy because I feel crazy with this discussion here about running backs. You're gonna hate me so much for saying this.
I'm ready to hate you.
How do you feel about Amir Abdullah?
Dude, no. Don't even start that.
Against the Jags.
No.
You don't like him?
Complete non-starter. I'd rather start one of these two. I'd rather start Tracy in the abysmal shit show that the Giants are.
I mean, the only reason I say it is that game's at 4:25.
It doesn't matter what time it's at. Vegas ain't going to do anything. This is the first time all year Jacksonville's been a favorite.
I'm just communicating that if we need a late pivot because these two guys are hurt, what late pivot?
He'll be on your waivers, but that's not being happy about it. That's just having something.
But what pivot would you take? If you needed to have somebody, what pivot would you take? If Pollard or Tracy couldn't go, and Tracy's game, they're both 1:00 games, so you would need either a 1:00 pivot or a 4:00 pivot. Which running back, availability-wise, would you want to take? Would you take a chance
aside from those two?
Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
I'm not signing. All right, Steve, I got takes on that. But to answer your question, Bob, I basically look at those at I don't want Abdullah. I don't think he's going to get enough carries or make things work. Now, Steve, to your question about Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I own him in both of my longs that are still available, playing for the 1.5 million.
I love that. I love it if Raheem Mostert and Clyde Edwards-Helaire win $1 million.
I would love that too. Absolutely, I would love that. But we got to be realistic. Edwards-Helaire, yes, he has fresh legs. So does Kendre Miller. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been on a practice squad where anyone all year could have taken him at any point, and no one has. So, do I think he's a must pickup? No. I think he's the backup to Kendre Miller for a minimum this week. He might come in and get a couple of basic carries. I do not see him involved in the passing game. He's only going to arrive at the facility on Thursday. So how much of the playbook is he really going to be able to absorb? So this week, maybe he gets some basic B gap, C gap runs, run an inside zone, stuff that, you can do anywhere that's the same, but he'll be non-existent in the passing game. That's where Kendre Miller is going to be at. That's where the Saints basically shine anyway. So I'm not sprinting to go pick him up. I don't think he's a must pick up by any circumstances. But I do think he's a better late game pivot than Amendola. Of course, Kendre Miller should also be on your board, who's better than all of the ones we named except for Pollard.
That's fair. We're gonna keep rolling through the quick hits, and then we'll get to all the deep dives that are in the queue. Ricardo, I lost.
Yeah, we got like 4 of them, so we got hustle. It's quick hits. Got some deep dives.
Lucky I have Jacobs and Kyron.
Ricardo, you got to start using the quick hit deep dive system, man. You got to start putting the QH to DD here, man.
Flex Myers or pick up Ford. I'm picking up Ford.
Yeah.
Joe might lean Myers or Miller, but I like Ford this week.
No, I'm on team Ford on this one.
So is Reichert and Hawkinson a 0 this week. Tyler, I think Reichert's going to have a tough sled of things. Hawk will probably get, maybe like 8-ish in that range of like 8 to 14 points. But yeah, that's rough for me. Yeah, we just saw that from now that Kamara is out. Lipsy, this is the one thing, for all of the team players that are out there. We have made some decisions on players that, have not turned out well, the Debos of the world, whatever. But Kamara is one of those guys that throughout the season, we have said that he's not one of the guys that we want going into the fantasy playoffs, despite the schedule, because we're looking at what Kamara does best. And then Kamara goes down like this. It sucks. It really sucks. And having a nice pivot is really good. If you need a pivot off of him, you definitely need to go out there and pick up Ford. You definitely need to go out there and pick up Kendre Miller. But again, there's a narrative script that you can write to yourself that the value of Kendre Miller might not be that high in this game, depending on how you see the scoring going in this game. Nick, Lutz or Fairbairn this week? We talked about this a little bit yesterday. I'm looking some stuff up. I'm looking up some stuff right now. Just looking at in the last 3 games. I'll come back to that, Nick. Come back to that.
Yeah, you got kicker deep dives up there, Bob. You can have fun with that. Appreciate it, Rumple. Appreciate the love.
Appreciate it.
Do we think Pickens is coming back this week? It's Ravens week. Everyone is coming back. That is basically what Tomlin just said. And you got to go with that because it's Ravens week. This is to win the division. Again, he will get to your kickers later, people. I already got Gibbs at running back. So if I add Cook, I could just put Jennings, Ricardo, or Devontae and Sharps on a 2-man flex. Well, if we're looking at your flex there, I'm looking at probably Jennings and Devontae out of that group, and you don't need to worry about Sharps anyway, Lipsky.
All right, coming back to that, Nick. I'm a little nervous. Fairbairn and Lutz are great starts this week. Probably top 8 starts this week. So anybody looking at Lutz or Fairbairn, top 8 starts this week. I see there's a good discussion that could be made that CJ Stroud might throw an interception or 2 to end a drive. When we look at Kansas City's defense, what I'm really looking at here is red zone scoring percentage in the last 3 games. So red zone scoring percentage in the last 3 games. Houston has scored 50% of the time. that they've been in the red zone, and Denver has scored 60% of the time. On the whole totality of the season, if we look in the last just over the whole season, Houston's scoring 54% of the time, Denver scoring 58% of the time. So it's a little bit closer. Last week, Denver touchdowns only, red zone scoring percentage last week 100%. Houston's 66%. So there's a good conversation that you can make that Fairbairn is a great start. That the matchup is nice, and
he hasn't been good outside. Even I know he hasn't been good outside, and he's going to be in Kansas City. It's going to be cold and hell is windy.
That's the other point. It's not going to be windy as much. We looked at the weather yesterday, unless that's changed.
It's weather. It'll change.
Yeah, I'm still on Lutz, I think, in that matchup, Nick.
Dude, there's never a night game in Kansas City in the fall that's not shitty. It's always cold and windy. It's like the law of the Midwest.
In terms of this top 5, it is Chase McLaughlin. By far and away. I understand that Tampa scores at a really decent clip. I'm not really, that's not something that I'm concerned about too much. But they are, over the last 3 games, scoring 50% of the time from the red zone. So it has presented a lot of opportunities for McLaughlin. And I can't start a kicker in the rain. I just can't do it.
Nick, you already got that deep dive. Don't you start with me.
Let's see. I already got Gibbs on the running back. So if I had Cook on running back, I could just put Jennings, Rico, Devonta Sharps on the 2-man flex spot. Absolutely. Yeah. Gibbs is a smash play this week, guys. I mean, if you consume any fantasy content, any creator out there, if you play DFS,
it's like a no-brainer.
Gibbs is going to be one of the highest owned DFS plays of all time this week. He's priced so well, so cheaply, that he's a smash. And I understand what happened to Derrick Henry last week, but guys, I mean, let's
Detroit doesn't slow down.
If it rains in that McMillan game, would you start Addison, or who would you rather start between London and McMillan?
I'm McMillan.
Yeah, I couldn't start. Yeah, again, the Addison thing really worries me with the weather. It said yesterday, I'm checking it again. It said definite rain yesterday. Falcons are at home
500 times.
Falcons are at home in a dome. So that benefits them significantly. The Tampa game, right now, that Seahawks game is at 85% rain, and that's today. So that's like kind of ooh. The Packers game might be snowy, Joe. Rattler in the snow. Woo, boy.
Rattling guns got to heat it up, baby.
That's gross. My. Sorry, what was I? I was looking at Tampa, right? Oh my God, that's disgusting. Why can't I show Tampa Bay? They're the Cowboys. They're in a dome too. Yeah, I'd be on London or McMillan. I would probably lean a little bit on McMillan more than London. But there's an argument to be made that London is a great start. Start 1: Sharps, Tracy, Rashad, or Najee. Top 5. We talked about this yesterday. I'm on Rashad White. Because I do think his workload is decently safe, even with Bucky Irving there. I do want to look up a couple of things about the rushing numbers there to see if they've changed over the past couple of weeks. But I think that Rashad is a great play. Najee is a sneaky.
You can make the argument Tampa's going to have the best offense out of the group too. Yeah. And the thing with Najee is he's a body blow guy. And they're going to have to give him the ball to protect the defense. The Steelers' defense was on the field for like a game and a half worth against the Eagles last week. They literally could not get off the field in the second half. So their defense is run down. Tomlin's going to run a very big ball control, Najee-centric offense. But the thing is, the guy doesn't have NFL quality explosion anymore. Maybe he never did.
He never had it at all.
But the point is that Rashad can give you blowout explosion, and I don't see you get it from Najee. I think Rashad has a much safer floor and a better ceiling.
Would you pick up Miller or Ford this week? It's Ford. Ford's safe. Nick,
No, we're not doing it. You already answered it. We're done.
Yeah, I already did. I already answered that. It's there. Dem crab cakes in Baltimore, though. No worries. The KC weather is worse than Pittsburgh.
That's 100% a fact. There's no way against that.
It can be. Right now, it's clear. 0% chance of precipitation. That's what
How cold is it?
How cold is it? What does it say? It says that it's going to be
so low darts. You got
3 degrees.
Bucky versus Irving. I love it. I love it. Just split that backfield right into King Solomon, that team.
All right, let's get to these deep dives, boys.
So this is a deep dive before the show even starts, so we only get to it an hour and a half in.
Someone somehow won my semifinals with Cup and Waddle. I was saying to Joe Rumpel that this is fascinating to me. Your team, you've built it so strongly that you can survive 2 zeros in your starting lineup and still make the championship. There's a very realistic chance that in most leagues that would not have happened. I was blown out by a 0 this past week too, which sucks really hard. Who do I start this week at wide receiver? Cup, Pickens, Waddle, Tillman, Coleman. Also need a tight end start between Kincaid, Ertz, or Dalton Schultz. So the Ertz might be made for you because I don't think Ertz will be a go. He's in concussion protocol still.
Yeah.
From when I looked at it this morning. I haven't looked at it since I'm looking at it right now. Doesn't practice. Dalton Schultz, interesting play.
Mm-hmm.
Not super sexy in my mind, but it's an interesting play. We'll do the same experiment here, Joe. I'll add Schultz to that pool of players that we talked about. And his touchdown percentage is even less than Kincaid's. So I think you have to lean Kincaid out of the 3 tight ends. I'm very curious, Joe, and this is for everybody out there too. I want to hear everybody's feelings. I know it's been not a year necessarily for super rookie tight end like explosions happening, but
aside from Bowers.
Yeah, other than Bowers, but I am deadly curious about Ben Sinnott this week.
Why?
Jesse Bates has been given a large share of the target share in Zach Ertz's absences, and Sinnott hasn't seen the field. But as we've said, Joe, over time and time again, that towards the latter half of the season, young guys do see the field a decent amount. The last game, if Zach Ertz can't go, the last game that Washington played against Philly, Zach Ertz had himself a game. So I'm just curious.
That just means Bates is going to have himself a game, though, because historically this is still true. Tight end is the longest position on offense to grow into as a rookie. It takes the longest to do it historically, about 3.5 years. Now we saw 2 glaring exceptions over the last 2 seasons with Kincaid and with Laporta last year. And we look at McBride. McBride's in his 3rd year now, and it's finally starting to take off. Yeah. It normally takes a while, and Stinton is nowhere near the talent level of those other 3. He doesn't even belong in the conversation. So I'm not even considering him at all. Bates is going to be the one who gets that.
Though, so I don't know. I just bring it up because I think
blocker doesn't matter.
I bring it up because I think it's interesting. But anyway,
do you get points for pancaking someone in fantasy? Being a blocker don't matter.
It's Kincaid out of those 3. If everyone was healthy, as you said, it'd be Ertz over Kincaid. So if everybody's healthy, I'm on Ertz over Kincaid, but it doesn't look like Ertz is going to be healthy. So I'd be on Kincaid in that respect.
And in terms of your receiver question, health also answers that. It's basically going to be Cup and whoever's not injured. So that's what you got there. So you drop Coleman for McMillan as I'm typing this. So he's an option. So basically your options are McMillan plus Pickens if he plays, plus Waddle if he plays, plus Tillman if he plays.
And to be honest, guys,
if they're all healthy, I would go Pickens over McMillan, but that's the only one I would.
Tillman's an absolute drop for me. Hurt, quarterback coming in that can't throw the ball. And I'm not even willing to wait on that. Like, I am, again, he's probably going to go off.
You don't have time to wait on it. It's championships.
But he's, like I said, but DTR, I am probably one of many that I am very much against DTR. Can't do it, guys. Can't do it. But yeah, Cup, is a good enough play this week. Cup is a good enough play this week. Let's pull up some data here, Joe, to see why Cup is a good play this week.
Cup's the only play this week.
We talked about this.
We also said Cup was going to be a good play last week. Got blanked for the first time in his career. So,
but Cup is still a good play because outside of this past week, and to know how rare this is, Cup has like never gotten a 0 in a game where he's played more than X amount of snaps. This was total toxic energy that Cup was throwing out this past week. Okay. Total toxic energy. I blame myself. But when you look at Cooper Kupp, Cooper Kupp is a very relevant threat to get a touchdown this week.
Oh, yeah.
Cooper Kupp is a very relevant threat to have a large share of targets. Okay. He's always a relevant threat to do that. The matchup is good. But as I said, I much rather favor Puka Nacua over Cooper Kupp because this aligns much better to what Puka does well and not what Cooper Kupp does well. So that's
granted, but out of this roster here, guys.
Out of these guys,
yeah,
he's the only healthy one.
Yeah.
So you are forcing yourself into Kupp, and I think you got to start McMillan. McMillan and Kupp would be my guys if I need 3. I'm hoping Pickens plays and going Kupp, Pickens, McMillan. But I'm also dropping Tillman.
Okay? Oh, you're definitely dropping Tillman.
We can't hold on to Tillman right now. I know what Joe said, unless it's Dynasty, Rumpel. You can't hold on to Tillman unless it's Dynasty. But I'm so off of Tillman. Knowing that McMillan was on waivers, I'm thinking that it's not Dynasty. And going out there and looking at some pivots, I think it will be important for your team to have them. Mooney's probably not available for you, but like I said, Ray McCloud works in that zone that the Giants do give up a lot of yardage in. Maybe Penix gets his ears wet by giving it to Ray in that zone. So maybe that would be an interesting pivot for you this week. Joe, anybody else that he could look at that if injuries are a factor this week that you would be interested in the wide receiver market at all? Bateman, of course. He won't be available.
Well, I don't know if I want to go Bateman. I mean, I have him for some longs, but he's more of an insurance guy. You could go if no, because everyone there's sure to be anyone out there that's outstanding. Aside from McMillan that you really can get that would be of any note whatsoever for the receiver position, unless I'm blanking on someone obvious. Yeah. So Rumpel, who is your waivers? So I don't have to guess. Who's your waiver wide receivers last?
Yeah. And we'll circle back to that too. Steven Zai, we see your quick hitters there. Nick, we see you as well. But yeah, and
I gave it deep dive, baby.
To anybody out there like Rumpel here, who's dealing with a significant number of injuries on their team, if it's tied to a bad quarterback situation like Tillman, I know Tillman's matchup is a positive matchup for the most part, but the quarterback play is, unless DTR has developed so much in the last several weeks, they did put him in ahead of Jameis Winston, then he got hurt. So maybe there's something that I haven't seen that nobody has seen that said, "Hey, let's give this guy a run." And but here's the other point: you wouldn't have went out and got Deshaun Watson, paid him $80 bajillion if you thought DTR was your answer. Just being brutally honest with you.
Oh no, they drafted DTR after they signed Watson because they needed a cheap as hell backup.
I get it.
DTR was there to prove he's a backup. So he can be cheap on the lam whenever Watson's there. So,
boy, huge mistake.
So we're about to start Bob's Kicker Fest. Here's the deep dive about it. There is about 6 of you asking a new quick hitter kicker question. Bob is going to do a bunch of kickers, and I'll be
all right. So, guys, for all the kickers here, what we want to look at is field goal attempts. We also want to look at the team's ability to get a touchdown in the red zone. When we see these kickers, out of this group of kickers, there are a lot of interesting options over the course of the next several weeks. There's also a lot of interesting options this week. We brought down a couple this past yesterday to talk about. Just here's a couple more. I'm going to read you some stats from Fantasy Pros in terms of field goals attempted. We'll compare them against red zone touchdown potential for these teams over the last several weeks. All right. So get your notebooks out. We'll just go through this. The first kicker that's probably available on waivers. I want to get to that. Make sure I have these questions here as well. The first kicker that's out there, Chad Ryland. Okay. In the since week 11, from week 11 to week 15, he's attempted 14 field goals, 11 field goal, or he has attempted 14 field goals, made 11. So he's hitting it at a 78% clip. But his extra points are not where it's at. So 5. All right. 5 extra points attempted, 5 made. Daniel Carlson is in the same kind of boat. 10 field goals made, 13 attempts. We're looking at 6 extra points attempted. He missed an extra point. Sanders, 11 for 11, 8 for 10 on the extra points. Don't like that. Then you're coming down to a guy like McManus. McManus is a tough sell in the snow. All right. He's made 17 extra points since week 11, 8 field goals. So maybe that's not the market that you want to go to. Snow plus all that, I'm not willing to get into that. Matthew Wright, 8 for 9, who was the reason I bring this up is he was the kicker for Kansas City. So that paints a little bit of a nice picture. 2 extra points attempted. Coming down here with Butker. Where do we want with Butker here? Look it up here. All right, Butker missed a field goal recently. Let's take a look where he's at. Full participant. Again, it's hard to start a kicker coming back from an injury. We got a little bit burned by Reichert a couple weeks ago, so I'm off Butker for sure. Then coming into the discussion as well, we'll look at the weather after this as well. Then you come down in the last 3 games. You look at red zone scoring percentages. Okay. So in the last 3 games, you're at looking at where these kickers are at. Kansas City has scored a touchdown in 33% of the times that they've been to the red zone. So Butker maybe elevates a little bit more if that injury doesn't worry you that he's come across. Coming down to Chad Ryland. Chad Ryland, Arizona has scored a field goal in 38%. Thanks, Max. 38%, or has scored a touchdown in 38% of their attempts in the red zone. So that's why we see Chad Ryland that high. Coming down here, Tampa Bay, Chase McLaughlin, 50%. So 50% of the red zone attempts or red zone scoring, they've had a touchdown. That's an option that's open to us. Coming down here to Sanders, Miami is going at a clip over the last couple of games of the last 3 games of 60%. If we change our framework here to week 12 through week 14 to see where that lies with Jason Sanders, to see if that number of that 11 for 11 changes significantly or not. Since that, we see that Jason Sanders is 9 for 9 in that same string. So this is a team that's moving the ball and is moving the ball really, really well. So as it goes to all the kicker questions that are in here, I don't think that I can trust Reichert this week, although I think he's one of the best kickers out of the bunch. The situation with the weather is really, 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 really crappy. I mentioned Kayami Fairbairn a couple moments ago, and Will Lutz as well. When we look at a guy like Will Lutz, he's 8 for 8 since week 12, and he's gotten 11 extra points. So the balance there is really, really nice. Extra points attempted, field goals attempted. There's a nice balance between there. The only worry that you might have is, do they score a little bit more touchdowns over the next couple of or over this game? Out of the grouping, You can paint a picture. Let's see here. And the percentages, if you want to look up those percentages, they come from team rankings. But as we go, let's go and take a look at a separate stat and see special teams defense. And let's see opponent field goal attempts per game. So that's another metric to look at. So opponent field goal attempts per game. So we just looked at red zone. What's the issues here? Let's look at who has in the last 3 games allowed the most field goal attempts. Looky. The Chargers have allowed 3.7 field goal attempts in the last 3 games. They allowed 2.6 at home. They're at home. Okay. Will Lutz jumps up the charts significantly there. Then we come and look at Carolina. Carolina has allowed 3.3 field goal attempts per game over the last 3 games. And while at home, where I believe they're playing at this week, maybe I'm wrong about that. Panthers are playing at home. They have allowed at home, where are we at? Around 3.1 field goal attempts. This goes to their average of 2.5 a game. So Ryland is on the map. The only question with Ryland is that, do you believe that they're going to score more touchdowns in this game? As it goes to the Miami game, Joe, San Francisco versus Miami. The Niners in the last 3 games have only given up about 2 field goals per game. They gave up 4 last week to Cardi because of the weather. So, the weather was significant in stopping drives. So, Steve, to your question here, I don't like to start kickers in the rain, but we just saw a successful kicker off in the rain in San Francisco. But the rain in San Francisco is a little bit different than the Seattle rain. So that kind of plays a role into the decision of maybe Riker is not the guy that I want. So as it goes, the guys that I would prioritize as kickers this week would be Lutz. I would prioritize Lutz. Chargers have given up a lot of field goals recently. I would also prioritize Chad Ryland in that same respect. And, if you believe that, and I don't trust a kicker really very much in the snow. I'm not trusting Daniel Carlson because they're just not moving the ball significantly to get into field goal range. That's kind of where I'd be at in the field goal market. So hopefully that helped everybody who's asked a kicker question. Some of the better ones this week, Fairbairn, Joe's off Houston in general in that regard in terms of the kickers. So, an easy pivots to Will Lutz in a good environment, Chad Ryland in a good enough environment, Sanders also in that discussion as well. If you're looking at any other teams that have allowed a lot of kicker points in the last 3 games, you can look at anybody, Jets. Who's facing the Jets this week again? So Cardi.
Jets facing the Rams.
Cardi's potentially a good option again this week. But the Rams score significantly higher at a higher clip in the red zone than anybody else. So maybe that's not the guy you want to pivot into. But I like Chad Ryland. I like Will Lutz. I don't think you could go wrong with them. You're looking for probably about 6 to 9 points out of them. 9's probably a nice ceiling for them. They could go off for 12, 14, depending on how their offenses go.
So Bob, we need to dive into Quincy's deep dive before he's got to leave. It's been an hour since he asked it, so it's a fair hit up. Start 1 quarterback, Daniels or Love, 2 running backs, Gibbs, Charbonnet, or Granado, 2 receivers, Debo, Jennings, Thielen, or Waddle. The tight end is Kraft or the Hawk. Kicker is Aubrey. Defense is going to be Denver or Philly. Grade the team with only 1 flex option. So overall, I think you're in a good spot. Your weak spot by far is having to play both of the Niners.
But I don't think you are. I don't think you can.
Tell me how you build a lineup where you don't have 2 Niners in it.
So
with the
honestly,
flex.
obviously I'm on Daniels. I think Daniels is an A1 start this week, healthy against Philly. I think he's an A1 start, and for the very reason that, if you have any reservations about Daniels, then Philadelphia would be your play at defense this week. But I don't have any reservations about Daniels, so I'm rolling Denver out in the defense. I know it kind of goes against what we've been saying all week, but I do believe that it is kind of counterintuitive to have a successful quarterback and have that successful defense in the same regard.
Yeah, you can't really do it. So that makes sense. I'm good with that.
So I'm on Jane Daniels and the Broncos for your team, and I think that those are A+ starts starting there.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, Kyren and Gibbs are by far and away two of the most phenomenal running backs that you can have going into the fantasy playoffs this week.
Yeah.
Kyren is a super volume-based running back. He's not explosive at all. The Jets are a team that if the Rams go up early, they're going to be playing catch up with Rodgers, and, they're going to want to beat the clock down with Kyren. The Jets aren't giving up a lot of points on the ground recently because their defense on the back end has been so bad. So I'm okay with the Kyren discussion, and I don't need to talk about Gibbs because you have been absorbing all kinds of content this week about how Gibbs is such a phenomenal start because he is.
He is, yeah.
And you can't walk your way out of those two guys. In terms of the tight end market, the rain scares me with the Hawk, but also the snow scares me with Kraft, and also the fact that they're probably not going to have to use Kraft. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, Quincy, and the fact that, Jordan Love's really not. I mean, I'll pull it up a little bit more, Joe, while you talk about the wide receivers too. But I think that when we look at Jordan Love, his most successful games this season has been where he has been passing the ball at a good clip. And we're just not getting to the point yet where he's having to do that because Josh Jacobs is there. I mean, you're looking at in the last several games, 27, 20, 28, 13, 17. It was back on November 3rd against Detroit that he had 29 or 39 pass attempts. His highest this season was against Minnesota, where he had 54 passing attempts. Okay. He had, and against Houston and Arizona earlier in the season, he was at 33 and 32. But since then, he has been a significant downgrade. And there's been multiple weeks in that middle part of the season where he got 0 touchdowns. Recently, he's been in that 2 touchdown to 1 touchdown framework. So with that in time, that's why, I believe Love isn't a good start. But I also believe that Kraft is a tough start. Because
I don't think you can do Kraft.
Because Kraft has, when you start the tight end, and, especially in PPR, you want either a guy that's going to have a lot of volume with a little bit of touchdown upside, or you're starting a touchdown upside guy. But Kraft right now has very limited touchdown upside. So does Hawk to the same degree. But I think
Hawk has way more volume.
I think the Hawk will accumulate more volume because he's not in a timeshare with any other players. There's a very strict pecking order in Minnesota. It's J-Jeff, it's Addison, it's Hawk, it's Aaron Jones. That's it. And in Green Bay, it's Jacobs, it's Wicks, it's Kraft, it's Dobbs, it's Watson. You don't know what you're getting. Kicker's fine. So it comes down to these wide receivers, Quincy. You have Strange as well. Yeah. I mean, I could see myself pivoting on Strange if I don't like Hawks weather. So you've already heard my opinion about that and Joe's opinion about that. The one thing that I want to bring up, and this is one thing that we missed yesterday because it came after yesterday's episode. Legette's dealing with a groin injury.
Yeah.
So
Coker might be a pick-upable guy. You asked me that question earlier today. Who might be someone to pick up? Coker would be one.
Christian, good to have you back. Coker is one of those guys that, yes, Thielen's touchdown kind of upside, whatever, fell by the wayside this week with Coker in. But I think with Legette out,
Thielen's back.
Thielen's back, man.
Yeah.
And so the conversation that I'm having with you, Joe, is that I would take Thielen over Debo. And I don't even think I'd have to write home.
Yeah, that takes your problem of having 2 Niners out there out of the way. And then I can live with that.
Thielen Jennings, a Thielen Jennings
who's your flex then?
A nice, really nice volume play where if Thielen is able to accumulate, and again, Carolina faces Arizona. I want to look in here at Arizona's total pass attempts allowed, because that will be an important note, just to see where the percentages lie. Arizona is allowing, last week they had 23 pass attempts allowed, but they're around 31 pass attempts, so not the highest in the league. But when we look at Bryce Young over that same course of time over the last 3 games, Bryce Young has been sitting at, where are we at? Carolina's been sitting at 36 pass attempts. So you can easily walk yourself into a conversation that if Arizona's controlling the clock, they're limiting pass attempts with James Conner and whatnot. So maybe Bryce Young only gets to about 26 or 28. But insofar as that's true, there's only 2 targets there to kind of write home about, and that's Thielen and that's Coker. And maybe you put in Tommy Tremble or Jatavian Sanders or some conversation like that. So you look at where are 26 targets going to be distributed. You look at 8 for Thielen, 6 for Coker, and then the rest of the 10 go to random people. Yeah, sure. I can walk myself into
give me
a
Thielen
really
in
good
that
conversation that Thielen with volume against Arizona would be fine. Joe, give us a reason why Debo might be fine if you could find one.
I don't have one. This is paraphrasing. I've been on the Debo bus forever, all season long. I don't really have anything else for the Debo love there. But Bob, my real question for you with Quincy's question as we're wrapping up his deep dive is, then who's your flex? Are you going Charbonnet, Granendo? Are you picking up someone off the waiver wire like McMillan?
Yeah, I mean, in my flex, Quincy, I would highly contemplate starting Strange in the flex as a volume play. It's not a sexy play, and we really don't like starting double tight ends, but it has worked this season, especially when you go on the volume tight ends. Okay,
it's worked when it's Kittle and Jonnu, though.
I'm there with you. I understand that. That's why I'm saying you could. If it were me, I would most likely be moving into see if I can find Ford. Seeing if I could find McMillan if he was somehow still on the waiver wire today. If I had to make a play, it would have been Garendo, but the hammy. I mean, he's with the hammy. He already dealt with an ankle thing. That's rough. So if it's left down to the player pool of Sharbs, a hurt Garendo, a Debo, and a Waddle, I mean, I'd be scouring the waiver wire, to be honest with you. That's kind of where Charbonnet, I guess, would have to go in. But again, the ceiling of Debo, the ceiling of Charbonnet, if Walker's back, and Waddle with the injury, maybe you just start Waddle in case he plays, and then you make this decision over the weekend if you're not seeing that he's going to trending upwards. Because again, the Thursday injury reports are going to tell us a lot. So if he's still on the Thursday injury report, but this is also the reason that I hate these early Thursday games and whatnot, for the same reason the Cup is that, Joe, I walked into this last week and was like, oh, Mike Evans has been a limited participant Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday. Well, hammies, he's dealing with that hammy thing. I'll just throw in Cup, even though I wasn't sold on Cup last week, if you remember correctly.
I do remember.
Totally freaking burned me because I started Cup and Jennings, taking out 2 of my wide receiver spots, and I didn't want to remove Monty and all that stuff out of the flex spot. So, I mean, that's what happens here. So that injury report might be telling us a lie. We'll have to watch. But out of the players remaining there, Waddle's probably your best chance. So focus on those injury reports, looking at Thursday primarily. Friday, if everything looks a go for Friday for Waddle, and looks like a go for Garendo, I think I would pivot to Waddle because I do get worried about those hammies. I really,
right, so let's do size deep dive here, and then we'll hit those other new questions that just kind of came in over the last couple of minutes. That's how we'll hit this up.
Right,
so we're going to do size deep dive. Kamara will more than likely be out, so I really need help with my flex. Half PPR, Reed, McMillan, and Worthy are in my waiver, and I just dropped Debo and Swift, playing the best team in the league.
They just dropped Debo and Swift.
Oh, correction. They just dropped Debo and Swift.
Okay.
I still think I'm going with McMillan.
Yeah, so...
Oh, and Hopkins. Hopkins is also out there.
There is a strong discussion here, Joe, in the half PPR league that what I'm looking for, and this is what we mentioned about the tight ends a little bit earlier in the day. Tight ends with touchdown upside or players with touchdown upside are valuable anywhere, but they're particularly valuable in half PPR leagues because the scoring adjusts, to that
accordingly.
When I look at these players, every single one of these players in the wide receiver market of Reed, McMillan and Worthy currently have touchdown upside. Debo and Swift, I know, Swift, Chicago is not that great right now in terms of running the ball. Swift is a good enough running back, but, outside of getting called back touchdowns and all that stuff, it's been limited opportunities to show success. Looking at rushing touchdowns per game, you look at where they're not even relying him at the goal line, right? So you look at it and you say to yourself, well, that sucks. You look at where Chicago's at in general. On average, Joe, this season, they're averaging less than 1 total rushing touchdown a game. In the last 3 games, 0. So there is
let's rely on a rookie who can't throw. There's
no upside with DeAndre Swift.
No,
there's no upside to Debo. If we're being brutally honest, there is no upside to Debo.
Not at this point.
So looking at it, you're looking at, okay, where is the possibility for success at? Considering weather, considering all these opportunities, considering maybe Patrick Mahomes plays, maybe Patrick Mahomes doesn't play, and you land on.
So if Mahomes doesn't play, I don't want the Chiefs. So to me, this very quickly is I don't know how not the answer is McMillan.
But this is where we're getting at here. So you go then and you pivot and you say, okay, well, if all of that is there, why is Jalen McMillan a good play? Why is Jalen McMillan a good play? So, Joe, give us a reason that we haven't already stated of why Jalen McMillan is a good play.
Because Tampa's a very good offense that people aren't giving credit to as a starting point. They put up a legit amount of points. We have them projected to put up a really solid amount here this week. Looks like the fourth most in the league this week. And McMillan has taken over all of that Auden love that they were getting in the beginning of the year. McMillan has done
Godwin love.
Well, it all stems from originally Godwin love. But McMillan has stepped in and done exactly what I projected him to do, which was take Godwin's share as the season went on. Now, Godwin's injury accelerated that. He wasn't ready yet, so Auden took over. But McMillan is the guy who is the eventual heir apparent to Godwin, and every single week he's stepping up and showing that it's that guy. We're seeing the future of Tampa, Evans and McMillan. A couple of years is going to be McMillan and a new stud, but that's what it is right now, and I love the setup there. Furthermore, Reed is too volatile against New Orleans just because we have no idea who's scoring in that game, and I really do think they're going to take the foot off the gas and go home. And I don't want to play either of the Kansas City Chiefs without Mahomes. The one I would want would be Hopkins over Worthy, but without Mahomes, I don't want to do that. And the whole reason I say that is because Mahomes has the reps with Hopkins, and Hopkins doesn't have the luxury of being out there for an infinite amount of snaps because they're literally holding his snaps back so you don't have to pay the higher draft pick, which all of that makes sense. You're up 2 games on the first seed, but the reality is it makes Hopkins a very scary play with the backup quarterback. So you add all of that up together, so I'm very comfortable and safely on McMillan.
Yeah, and I mean, it really there you could look at a lot of things happening, and you know you could go to schedule adjusted points, and you can look all that up, and that's a good way to navigate this situation. You know, there is, when you look at the percentages of where McMillan is playing on the field, it lines up that he can have a super successful game. There's nothing to say that he can't be successful. The only thing that you might be saying is, well, the Cowboys have been getting a decent amount of turnovers. They've been running the ball really well. Maybe that stays out of the hands of Baker Mayfield. Maybe. I don't see it.
I don't see it either.
I think that McMillan, and like I said, guys, I'm talking him up a lot, and I feel really bad because, there is a curse. But
it's not that big of a curse. You're right 80% of the time.
The fact remains is that the situation is so overwhelmingly positive for Jalen McMillan that, notwithstanding everything else, I mean, it's just a really, really wonderful play. And when you look at the other optics for these other players, Joe, you can write a narrative as well, like I did the other day, where I'm absolutely not in on the Reed narrative, but I can write one. But I think Worthy, regardless of who's at quarterback, will probably be fairly successful in this game. You look at Houston as a team, and you ask yourself, okay, like where are we looking at in terms of how many points did they give up to wide receivers over the last couple of games? And, I'm seeing here that they're a good matchup. They're a good matchup for wide receivers. They're a good matchup for players when they play out of the slot. Worthy gives you that dynamic proposition that maybe he runs in a touchdown, maybe he catches a touchdown. So regardless of where Patrick Mahomes is playing, Worthy and Reed, Worthy more than Reed right now, gives you that upward swing that there could be a rushing touchdown. There could be an extra piece of the pie, whereas Jalen McMillan is just purely a pass catcher. So when I see this, I'm very highly on McMillan for all of the reasons that I stated, all the reasons Joe stated, high implied point total, a matchup that's probably going to go more back and forth than people think, because, while the Cowboys are not like the impending like doom of an offense who's going to score like a boatload of points on you, they've put up respectable points against bad defenses with not so fantastic quarterback play. So, I'm not writing this off, because the Bucs are not a good defense by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, heck, you look at it, Joe, week 12, they beat the Commanders. So this is a game that's going to be a game. Like I'm not sugarcoating that at all. I think this game is going to be a better scoring game than most people would think. Joe, what's the implied point totals that we have in this game?
So the implied point totals are going to be 47 total, 24 and 23.
Okay. I mean, that sounds good to me. It's
one of the higher of the week.
That sounds like a rushing touchdown for Bucky, a pass catching touchdown for Rachaad White, and then some touchdowns split in there for McMillan and Evans.
Tight game. You're going to want to run it.
Sounds like CeeDee Lamb and Rico are going to get involved. Maybe some Jake Ferguson. I like that. I like that a lot. So hopefully that helps, Zy. Let's get into the follow-up here to Nick, pick up McMillan to replace Worthy. I see McMillan's production recently. Yeah, for all the reasons we said, Nick. Going back to your question here, Rumpel, in terms of the waiver wire ads, Dobbs is a nice ad. Snow kind of, pushes me away for the same discussion. I like the idea of adding Ray McLeod as a pivot if I needed to, and I was worried about my wide receiver room. So I'm not on any of the Cleveland wide receivers as long as DTR is there, Rumpel. Ryan, Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr. or Mixon at the flex? This is nice. It's nice to have this problem, Ryan. The question I would ask you is, who do you have in your starting lineup that these guys are your flex options? Because your starting lineup will carry you through. I like BTJ this week. A lot, you're going to hear a lot of good information out there in the coming week about BTJ. It's a plus matchup. Mac Jones has looked good. The one thing, and we talked a lot about Neighbors yesterday. We actually ended the show yesterday with some of me bad mouthing Boyle. A
lot of that actually.
I'm not going to take away that Neighbors had a fantastic PPR point total last week, and I'm also not going to take away that that he might be able to do that again on an insane amount of target share.
I think there's going to be so much drawn up for him.
He'll probably get like 14 attempts, but Boyle will only throw the ball 15 times. It would be something stupid like that.
Sounds about right, actually.
But I just can't. I see so much limited upside potential here, especially against a team like Atlanta, who is capable of just running the ball down your throat. I mean, they had what? How many rush attempts did Bijan have last week? Like 22, and Tyler Algier had like 12. I mean, they don't even have to pass the ball to be successful and win the game. And you saw that, the Raiders struggled. I mean, you look again at where Atlanta was at the week prior. Atlanta got blown out. Their backs got blown
Atlanta's
out.
First win in forever. So
right.
I guess Ryan, I think my answer for this one being a quick hit is going to be Brian Thomas Jr. I think you're going to get relatively the same amount of volume in terms of catchable balls as you will at Neighbor. But Thomas was a better LSU receiver last year. He's a better LSU receiver entering here. Got so much shit for it in the offseason. Comes to pass, don't it?
Christian, stuck between Rodgers, Kyler, and Love. I'm off Love, Christian. I'm off Love.
It has to be Kyler,
especially this week. I think it is Kyler. You can go back to yesterday's episode, Christian, and earlier in today's episode where we broke down Kyler pretty significantly. I think that Kyler's best shot, again, at having that upswing potential is where that rushing market is. Can you see a pathway for Rodgers to have 3 touchdowns? That's the only thing that I'm going to say, like 2 touchdowns will get you 15 points. But, Kyler's upside this week is kind of weird.
And guys, if you guys don't say it's a quick hitter or a deep dive, we're just going to be assuming they're quick hitters at this point.
Will, who should I start my tight end spot between Kincaid or Hunter Henry? It's Kincaid. Go back if you weren't here for the rest of the episode, go back. We talked about the Dalton Kincaid and Hunter Henry, especially in PPR. Joe, PPR though, Hunter Henry's a little bit of a different beast.
No, because they were averaging the same amount of targets, Buffalo, but Kincaid had higher touchdown share.
Buffalo is tough. And Mr. Magic, to this question, I would be on both. I think it's a coin flip. The Falcons matchup is really good. The Bengals matchup is really good. I like what the Bengals have been doing against bad teams.
You can't give me the Bengals when they just lost their best pass rusher.
DTR sucks. It doesn't matter because DTR sucks. You could put in a kindergartner on your defensive line.
The Giants are worse. Period.
I get it. They're both bad. They're both
bad defense against even worse offenses. But I would rather go with Atlanta.
That's fair. I take both. I don't care which one. I would put them both. I'm throwing both into my DFS lineups because they're decently priced this week. Start Burrow or Baker. Burrow didn't do great against Cleveland last time, and Baker's playing Dallas. Adam, the narrative there is that Joe Burrow might not have to play well at all.
Burrow, he might not.
Joe Burrow, you might see a Joe Burrow if Jameis Winston was starting, barn burner, absolute elite game for all players, right? You're starting everybody. You're making stacks. You're starting everybody from this game. DTR screws the whole thing up. So if I'm thinking about starting Joe Burrow has carried you far, and Joe Burrow is elite. Joe Burrow has gotten over 24, 25 points almost every single game this season. Hey, Ricardo, I mean, UCLA, man. I props to you for having the mad respect for DTR, but I am not there. So let's go back to this for Adam. It's Baker Mayfield.
Thrown off by that.
It's Baker Mayfield for every reason that we said in our conversation about Tampa Bay.
Yeah, it is.
While the you might be nervous about quarterback play against Dallas. Dallas is actually, when you look at schedule adjusted points in that, has actually been playing better over the last 5 games. Ever since Micah Parsons came back, they've actually been playing better. So you walk into it and say, okay, well, maybe Baker, but I can easily see a pathway for Baker to have 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I can't see that for Burrow, even in a good enough matchup. But the Browns, Joe,
you're gonna run too many in.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather be on, like, when you're looking at schedule adjusted points, Baker's matchup is better than Burrow's matchup, so you have to go with Baker, especially if you think he's going to throw for 3+ touchdowns. I'm on Freiermuth.
Yeah,
Freiermuth is a target in the red zone. They're probably going to be able to move the ball well in this matchup, Joe.
If Pickens is in, I think I like Freiermuth more, but I especially like him when Freiermuth's out. Like I think Freiermuth is definitely the smash hit there.
Rumpel, we've had a lot of David and Goliath matchups over the course of the last 2 seasons, and any given Sunday, Saturday, Thursday, anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. TS, welcome, TS. Start 2 PPR. Evans, Scary Terry, Mixon, Jason. You have to be on Evans.
I think that's the order you wrote them. I think that's the right order.
You have to be on Evans. And TS, I understand the Quinion Mitchell matchup, man. I really do. We were there. If you joined us, you could go back to that week, that Quinion Mitchell week on Thursday, and I wrote out a script that gave you a script for the successful pathway for Terry McLaurin. The guy goes and gets 1 catch for 2 yards. So the scariness is real, but also Jane Daniels wasn't super healthy in that matchup. This is the second time around. Game planning is going to look different. Kingsbury cannot allow that to happen again because Terry McLaurin is his best pass catcher. There is absolutely no way you would, if you are playing your rival and you did that again, I would immediately fire you. If you didn't give your best player the ball at all, or best pass catcher at all, I would immediately fire you, especially if Ertz doesn't play. If Ertz doesn't play, this makes me like Scary Terry more. They have to move him around the formation. They can't keep him on Quinion Mitchell the whole time. And if he's not on Quinion Mitchell the whole time, he will catch a touchdown or 2.
You see a lot of motion out of him.
JSN, again, I like JSN, but the rain keeps me away. Christian, it's Neighbors for me on volume.
See, it's Pickens for me on volume.
Pickens
going to have more catchable passes, even if the target number's smaller.
I'm there with you, but I really dislike starting wide receivers immediately coming back from an injury.
That's fair.
But as we said yesterday, Christian, and as we said today, you don't want Tim Boyle.
No, you don't.
So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at there. Brian Callahan went on an absolute rant on people calling his team soft. Y'all have to watch the audio and play it in the chat. All right, let's pull that up. Joe, head to the next question while I pull that up.
This is actually the last question we have from Ricardo. Maybe we'll be able to end on his rant here. Although, actually, the problem with that, Steve, is we're going to take it from someone else's YouTube, and we will then get yelled at like crazy. So we might not be able to. We might just have to be able to refer you to it. We can't have the yellers of us for that.
Yeah.
But pick 3.
I can't do that.
Charbs, Aaron Jones,
the
more
dark days have
Neighbors.
returned, someone says. Wow.
So Ricardo, it's basically bench 1. You can't bench Aaron Jones. You know, as much as Bob's worried about the weather in Seattle, I'm worried about the weather in Chicago. But that being said, Bob went through all the statistics about how Chicago sucks at running the ball, and they just want to chuck it 5 million times and leave this quarterback to be exposed for how bad he is.
So we're back at Drew Lock. We're back at Drew Lock for starting quarterback. Thanks, Chris.
Doesn't matter.
Just looked it up. Came out a couple hours ago. Drew Lock's not that good either.
It really doesn't.
Better than Boyle. So for me, in your debate, Christian, I'm on Neighbors. In your debate, I'm on Neighbors.
Pickens. He can be Drew Lock or not.
Still,
he's not as good as
it doesn't affect quarterback. It doesn't affect me that much. But I'm still starting the Falcons defense against Drew Lock. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not like Drew Lock is like a gunslinger by any stretch of the imagination.
So for this one, before Bob gets down a rabbit hole and doesn't do the quick hitter, pick 3 between Sharps, Aaron Jones, DJ Moore, and Neighbors. Sharps is probably the one who has to be benched.
It's Aaron Jones, DJ Moore, and Neighbors. It's Aaron Jones, DJ Moore. And
Neighbors. So that's that one.
Yeah, unequivocally, Ricardo.
Jackson, welcome back, my man. Sit 1.
It's Brees.
We got 2 Jets and Mixon. So I'm definitely not sitting AJ Brown or Mixon. Brees is going to be the one I'd choose out of that group, Jackson.
Yeah, it's Brees, Jackson. And we can talk a little bit more tomorrow about why it is Brees. But everybody in the chat, Joe and I are going to hit the road. If you have a question, feel free to leave it in tomorrow's episode. We will answer it then. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be on tomorrow for a power hour between 3:45, 4:45. Maybe I'll stay on until around 5 o'clock. Joe's got to get to his axe throwing. So we thank everybody for joining today. Rumpel, I'll touch this real quick before we go. $5 bonus bet. How are you guys feeling about this money line parlay? That is Joe's favorite. 5
legs. I love Lions over the Bears. The Battle of Ohio scares me. I love the Rams. Love the Falcons. And I'm definitely on the Vikings. What I would rather do instead of the Bengals, Ohio, give me Jacksonville winning their first game as a favorite all year. So that's how I would go about that, Rumpel. Those with $5 bets become a couple hundred.
With a BTJ touchdown in that parlay as well.
Don't put a touchdown in a money line parlay. You will hate yourself.
3:45 Eastern Standard Time.
Welcome to Local Football Flavor, connecting the fan bases of the NFL.